So we are very happy to welcome everybody here to our August Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. This is a very special session because we will be featuring images that you submitted. So we look forward to seeing the types of plants, pests, and pathogens that are going on across the state that are in your yards. And as always, Mike Munster and Matt Bertone with the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic will be here with us, and they will be diagnosing the images that you submitted. I'll follow up with Plant These Instead feature, and we're going to be talking about wind resilient trees today. So some things you shouldn't plant, especially with hurricane season in mind, versus things you should plant, especially when we're talking about planting near structures. And we will close out with some Extension Master Gardener program announcements, so we encourage you to stick with us. Lots of exciting things coming up at the end. With that, I am going to turn it over to Matt and Mike, who are going to be showing us your images and telling us all about them. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so they can start their share. And welcome, Matt
Great.
and Mike.
Thanks, Charlotte. Can you hear me all right?
I hear you, yes.
Mike, you there?
I am here. Good morning, everyone.
Great, great. Well, let me start sharing. Can everybody see our thing? Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We are very excited to go through all of your photos. We are very thankful that we had so many good submissions, lots of good things to talk about. We will not be doing bolos today because I think we will have just enough time to do our part and Charlotte's part. And so we are going to go through these photos and talk about what we see in there. Mike, is there anything you want to add before I start going?
Well, just that the Matt was really excited for the last week or two about doing this program today. And I'm less excited because so often we can't really tell diseases from photos. So if you send a dogwood picture in particular, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. I won't have any good answers on those. But some things we will be able to talk about and give some diagnoses or reasonable approximations and some maybe even recommendations. So take it away.
Great. Yeah. And, you know, that's something even just to learn and to know about this is that some of these issues you can easily diagnose from photos. Others are going to be more difficult or impossible. And so that's one part of the presentation. One thing we hope you take home from the presentation. Okay. First one. All right. So from Donna Colson in Brunswick County from July 15th, says those tomatoes again, line splits. They were on the patio when I pulled them outside and they got full sun and looked good when green. When I pulled them outside and they were turning red. Well, it started when I put them outside and they were turning red. So, Mike, you try to continue?
Sure. This is a physiological problem. It's not a disease or insect. These are called growth cracks, and it's possible that when you move them outside, the conditions, growing conditions improved. Maybe they got more water, and so fruit that had already started to develop, especially under lower water conditions, when it starts to expand more rapidly, it may not be able to catch up with it. And you can get two different kinds of cracks, and you see both of them here. Do we have annotation capability here, Charlotte?
As the host, we should be able to.
Let's see.
If you go up to view at the top of the screen.
I
am not seeing it actually.
I'm not either. Well, anyway.
Oh, interesting. I see it on mine. If you go up to the top in the drop down menu, I'm full screen and I see annotate.
Because you are sharing your screen. That's
okay. Well, here maybe I can.
Well, that's okay. I'll just describe it, and
okay.
you'll be able to see. There's a difference between what they're called the concentric cracks and then the radial ones. So the radial ones emanate from the peduncular end there where the fruit was attached, and these concentric ones are more round. But without trying to get into too many distinctions, it's warm, wet weather will favor these, especially if the plants got a lot of water after they were stressed or had lower amounts of water. So you want to make sure you've got even watering, mulch, make sure that your nitrogen is balanced with your potassium, so you're not getting too much nitrogen for the potassium, and keep your leaf diseases under control so you have those leaves pulling out that transpiration stream. And if you still have problems, maybe consider going to a different cultivar, different variety of tomato. So for example, we always grow Romas at our house, and I don't see this problem on those, but I think there are also varietal differences within the beefsteak types as to how much of a tendency they have to do this. And I'm going to post I can do this in the chat, a link to a little Pest News article that Emma Lukabaugh did several years ago on these. All right.
Great, thanks, Mike. Oh, and I saw something in the chat. Why don't we see how much we get through here, and then I'll address the things in the chat, or we'll address the things in the chat. So next photo is from Teresa Surratt from Pitt County on July 2nd. This was on a small shrub in a container on my front steps. I believe the shrub is an ilex of some sort, of some type. The critter was just hanging on the branch. I think it is an assassin bug of some type, gradually turned brown. I haven't seen it since. Just found out it to be a very interesting with its bright orange color. And I think that's very interesting too. So this is, you are correct, this is an assassin bug. This is a wheel bug, and I'll show you that on the next page. This is, you can see it's not yet molting into an adult form because it doesn't yet have the little wheel on the back, and it's got these little wing pads still. Otherwise, you would see wings that were gonna stretch out. So it looks like this is kind of the final nymphal stage before, or instar before it becomes an adult. And basically that's going to be in between these two stages. So the very young nymphs are bright red with black and a yellow tips of the antennae. And then the adults, of course, are this grayish, dull grayish with this large cog on the back. So they are predators. They are one of the they are our largest assassin bug, very common around. And we're going to start to see, we're basically seeing the adults now because they only have one generation per year. So most of the early part of the year, they are growing. And as you saw in July, they were starting to molt to the teenage years kind of. And so anyway, don't handle them because they can bite and have a painful jab, but otherwise they're kind of generalist predators. So can be good or can be bad depending on what they're eating. Okay. All right, Mike, do you want to introduce this one maybe?
So this one, the information was disease problem days after leaves first appeared. So I assume that means that the problem initiated then, cantaloupe and milkweed. Well, there are two different things going on. I'll let Matt comment on the milkweed there on the right, but on the left, the cantaloupe, well, first of all, some comments about the picture itself. The good thing is that we see both the upper and lower surface of the leaf on this individual leaf. The bad thing is that since we don't see the whole plant, we don't see the distribution. But from the comment, it would seem that it was affecting the young leaves as well as the old. But that would be helpful to know in many cases. I can't tell you exactly what this is. It looks like it's probably a fungal leaf spot, fungal in the broad sense of the term. And Matt, if you could go to the next slide there, I listed a few of the possibilities. Gummy stem blight is one, anthracnose is another, alternaria leaf blight, and probably not downy mildew. It looks a little bit different on cantaloupe, but does tend to be large but less angular on cantaloupe than it is on cucumber. So I wouldn't completely throw that out. And any of these could be resolved fairly easily with a microscope or even a good hand lens. In all cases, the reducing leaf wetness, making sure you don't extend that overnight light leaf wetness period will help, and some some fungicide sprays may help as well. But if you've got something like downy mildew going on, that's going to be very difficult to control under conducive weather. But just one other thing, but I'll let Matt comment because the next slide doesn't have the milkweed on it. Matt, do you want to say anything about that before I
Yeah.
show
So
one other possibility here?
yeah, the milkweed appears to have some kind of insect or mite infestation. It's tough to tell here. These look like shed skins. It could be spider mites. So basically these yellow stippling, the curling of the leaves, kind of debris and everything underneath the leaves is a good sign that you have some kind of arthropod infestation. Now, I can't see close enough to tell. So this kind of falls under some of the things, diseases, and that I would either require very close images to identify what those things are, or a physical sample to take a look. And there may be multiple things going on, but it looks almost like spider mites, or probably like spider mites. But again, with just the one image, I can't confirm that.
All right, so with back to the cantaloupe here, the other thing we see going on is that sort of marginal yellowing there. So you wonder, especially if this was a newer leaf, you wonder about the nutritional status of it. And the last thing we want to consider, if you go to the next slide there, Matt, I show on the left of the screen here, one of the possibilities of the darker spots, which is gummy stem blight. Don't be fooled by the name. It does get on the stems, but it gets on leaves and fruit as well. But one sort of long shot, and you can see illustrated here on the right on cucumber, where the spots are really localized wilting reactions due to a problem lower down. And in that particular case, it was root knot nematodes. So I would definitely check the roots of that cantaloupe that was in that photograph, and make sure you don't have something going on down there as well.
All righty, yeah. All right, so this image is from Carol Keller from McDowell County, July 13th. Please identify caterpillar on basil plant. There were multiple of these. So luckily caterpillars are somewhat easy from images. Some groups are very difficult because they're not very well characterized, but this is one of the macro moths. This is one of the bigger ones that are kind of less diverse and have usually more distinct caterpillars. This one is the Virginia tiger moth, Spilosoma virginica. Here's what the adult looks like over here. These very pretty white moths. And you can usually tell tiger moths, the larvae, because they are fuzzy. They are, include the things like woolly bears and whatnot, salt marsh caterpillars. Basically all are at least a little bit spiky or fuzzy, if not very fuzzy. These are not a stinging caterpillar. They also probably don't produce very irritating hairs. But the Virginia tiger moth is in particular, at least one hair, one seta from each group of CD is about the length of 3 body segments. Whereas things like the fall webworm have extremely long ones, about 4 or 5 body segments long, and many other tiger moths like the salt marsh caterpillar have much shorter CD. So there's very light color and there's very long CD. Point to it being Virginia tiger moth, although there's some variation in colors, and sometimes the younger caterpillars have much longer CD until they grow older and the body gets bigger. But that's what this looks like. It can be kind of a sporadic pest. It just feeds on a bunch of different plants. But typically if you see one of these in the garden and you're worried about it being a pest, you can just remove it, throw it in a bucket of soapy water or something. They're big enough to find and kind of remove by hand, especially in a home garden situation. Okay.
So these pictures were submitted by Louise Romanoff, and I don't see her on the Zoom meeting here today to dialogue, but these are ones where I really don't know what is going on. It may be a common problem between the plants here in this low area, some kind of a root issue going on. I'm curious as to whether the picture in the center is showing, is that a frothy fermented type of material coming out of the stem, or what's the texture of that? But here's one where I don't really know, just to be able to say from the photos what's going on with the clethra and the aronia.
Okay. All right. So this one came from Chris Stecker. So this is in Alamance County from July 20th. Is this the dreaded spotted wing Drosophila swarming in and out of ripe blackberry fruit? Yes, and actually I would say these are overripe, some of these. And yes, it's a very distinct species, luckily. Now, the males are much more distinct than the females. I'll show you on the next slide. But these very distinct large spots on the, like one single spot, large spot on each wing is very diagnostic of the males. The females you have to look at under the microscope. And basically, these things will come that, you know, I just heard a seminar yesterday where spotted wing Drosophila will develop in a number of different things, including ripened fruits, decaying fruits, even things like dung and other materials and things like that, mushrooms and stuff like that. Not their preferred thing, but they prefer, you know, kind of just ripe or ripening fruit. So here is a picture of spotted wing Drosophilas. So the males, again, they have these spots on their wings, these fairly large diffuse spots. There are other Drosophiids, members of this family, that have spotted wings, but they don't look generally the same. The males will have these two combs on the front legs. The females look like a regular Drosophila you would find in a kitchen, swimming around rotting fruit. But they have this very distinct, large, saw-like ovipositor, and that's what allows them to pierce the fruit and lay eggs in the fruit. So going back, basically the best thing to do to keep these from infesting fruits is you want to keep them from being attracted. So you want to harvest fruit before it gets too ripe. And that's going to be really attractive to not only these, but other types of Drosophilids. So basically, there are chemical controls you can use, but predicting them is very hard and they're basically multiple generations throughout the years. So you have to have a lot of basically control measures to prevent them from spoiling a crop. So in commercial production, that can help, but I would say in home production, try to get the fruit before it gets too ripe. And if they are overripe fruit on there, I would remove them so that it doesn't attract these things to the other fruit. Okay.
Hey, Matt and Mike, I just wanted to mention, folks may have noticed the live transcription pop up. There was a request to turn that on, so I did turn it on. And if you don't want to see that, if you find the little icon that says CC, it'll be on the toolbar. You can hide them. So there's an option to hide subtitle. So just wanted to let everybody know what was going on with that.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is an interesting one. I guess I'll introduce it. So this is from Francisca Aller from New Hanover County from June 21st. These are submitted directly to Caroline, and they show her coneflowers, which were suffering from Astroyellows and Eriophyid mites. And so, yes, these are coneflowers. Now I will say, and I guess Mike can back me up, this looks mostly, if not all, looking at the good flower heads, like Astroyellows, not the Eriophyid mites. So this will be something that we make a distinction between. And Mike, do you want to give some of the observations on why it would be Astroyellows?
Sure. Well, first of all, we have some fancy names for this symptom, where you see, as in the flower and on the far left there that Matt's pointing to, where a flower part converts to a leaf, that's called phyllody. And in the center picture there, like on the right-hand side, you see it still looks like a flower, but it's got green color. That's called virescence. And both of those would be good clues that you have Astroyellows. Also notice that there are the entire flower head in each case is symptomatic. So the combination of those symptoms and the entire flower converting, either converting to a leaf or becoming green, that to me says aster yellows. So if you go to the next slide, all I did was repeat the
Okay.
diagnosis there of aster yellows, which is a phytoplasma. It's a type of bacterium that is transmitted by leafhoppers.
Mhm.
It's going to be systemic, so I would just go ahead and remove any plants that have this that are showing this symptom.
Yeah, and leafhoppers are super abundant all the time, basically all warm times of the year, all over all different plants. So removing sources of inoculum might be the best action. You can maybe use some kind of products to help some pyrethroids or some things like that to keep the leafhoppers from landing on and infecting these other plants. But again, it's basically constant pressure throughout the year, so it may get to be too much. And now just to contrast that, Charlotte did bring me some very nice echinacea with the mites, with the echinacea mites, which have not yet been described, but actually we are kind of going to be working on that. I'm collaborating with a colleague. They've been known for many years, but nobody's actually went ahead and described the mites. I actually found some while I was up in Maryland as another collection point. But you can see here, the flowers basically look the same. Of course, there's some kind of burning of the petals and things like that, but the petals are still going to be purplish or pink or whatever color. Most of the cone is going to be similar, normal, but then you get this sprout, this witch's broom kind of contorted and dense flower parts there, and all within there, these little tiny worm-like mites are going to be living, and they are very small though, only about 1/4 millimeter. So you can only see them really with a very high magnification pan lens or microscope. But otherwise, you can see the difference that we described between this and this very green, leafy type symptoms of aster yellows.
And let me just add one thing on the previous point about vector control. When you have pathogens that are vectored by insects or mites, it's sometimes vector control is helpful and sometimes it's not. So my hunch is, and I can't say this for sure, that it would be more effective with a disease like aster yellows, because as I recall, insect needs a longer feeding time to transmit it. Whereas some aphid transmitted diseases, for example, or viruses, they are going to happen so fast that before the aphid knows it's dead, it's already transmitted the virus. So it's kind of complicated, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. And
yeah, and that's a great point. And as far as the mites, they are once they're happy in the head, they're gonna at lower densities. If you start to see symptoms, pruning out those heads and disposing them, destroying them, will be the best way to keep other plants from getting infested by the mites. Basically, we don't know a lot about exactly what they do. They may overwinter on kind of, the remnant plant parts from these perennials. But they also, when they get in high densities or the head starts to dry out and die, that's when they move out, like this picture here. They rear up on their end and they wait for wind or splashing, or we think probably also they use maybe bees or things like that to come to the flowers to grab onto and go to different plants. And so, removing those once you see them is the best way to just destroy the source population.
So dogwood tree, since I've been living in the house 15 years, this is, as I said at the top, none of the dogwoods am I going to be able to give a very good explanation of. They're toward the kind of center left. I see some really strap-shaped leaves, even farther to the right there, Matt. Yeah, no, warmer, there you go.
Yeah, you go.
So that would tend to suggest some kind of a herbicide exposure. Other than that, I don't know. There are a couple possibilities for the spottiness and the kind of leaf rolling, but we'll talk a little bit more about dogwood problems in some of the other photographs. It would have been good too to kind of have a picture of the tree itself to see how the overall crown looks. But again, I'm not going to be able to say, and I apologize much about the dogwood issues today.
And I would say that I'm often asking people, and we're often asking people, instead of just showing a couple isolated leaves, it is good to see the whole canopy of a tree, or as much of the canopy as possible, to see how distributed those leaves are, or if they're in certain spots, or just the general health of the tree. If there's a lot of dieback or yellowing or things like that, those can be really informative for how overall the health of the tree is.
And always, always, always a picture of the base of the trunk to see if there's any kind of damage or canker or slime flux or buried too deep or girdling roots possibly even. So all of that's helpful to see the very base of the trunk. So again, here's a case where, so I think disease problem, I'm not sure, could be too much, too little water. Early June, our Cornus florida dropped all its leaves on two bottom limbs. Now that's interesting, it was just in the two bottom limbs. And then it stopped, but with cupping later. So here, this does not look like typical spot anthracnose, which we think of on bracts, but also can get on leaves. It doesn't look like septoria leaf spot, really. Doesn't look like powdery mildew. Certainly not dogwood anthracnose, especially in Pitt County. The symptoms also look wrong. So I don't know, maybe some kind of a drought stress is a possibility. This one I'm also not able to say, but we do have a picture of the crown and I don't see any dieback, so that's a good sign right there. I would take a wait and see approach on this tree, I think.
Okay, from Carol Keller, McDowell County again, on July 19th. There's an insect I cannot identify. It was on my front porch, definitely a female with males buzzing around her. Okay, so yep, that's probably correct as far as the buzzing around. These beetles will emit pheromones that will attract each other. And this is a pretty distinct species. Once you see it, you know, there's a little bit of variation, but once you know it, you know it. This is on the East Coast. This is going to be the green June beetle, Cotinus nitida. So they're this little bit metallic green, especially in some body parts like the belly, the head, legs a little bit are going to be very metallic green. There's going to be some kind of bronzy metallic, almost like dull to metallic green on the top of the body with some patches that are more tan, and it can vary. You can see in this specimen here, there's a little bit more. But this is a really common in the middle of the summer. They're called the June beetle because they come out around then. The larvae are living in the soil, eating plant roots, sometimes becoming a pest, a turf pest, but not very often. These are also called fig eater beetles, and they can commonly damage overripe fruits. So they use that nose to basically dig right into the fruit. They'll eat the liquidy stuff. They are not like Japanese beetles that can feed on leaves. So they won't be creating holes in leaves or anything like that. But they do like things like peaches, figs, grapes, other fruits that are soft enough for them to destroy and feed on the liquidy contents. They are very fast flyers. They can close their wing covers while their wings are out, so they can be very streamlined. And so they often look like wasps flying around meadows and places where the larvae are going to be, the eggs are going to be laid where the larvae are going to develop. Anyway, these are one of our larger scarabs around here, kind of at least one of the more mobile large ones, but they're only active for a short period of time in the middle of the summer, and then you really won't see them much. Okay.
So here we have our one and only turf example that was sent in. And fortunately, I have a turf expert with whom I could consult on this, but let's set the stage here. Cynthia Chandler, Union County in mid-July. The lawn company says it is a fungi, but no other information given. This browning is all over all my yard, front and back. The guy next door does not have this problem, and he also has Bermuda. Assume Bermuda grass and not Bermuda shorts. Would the lawn company have put too much of something on my lawn to create this browning? What do you think the problem is? And further, the lawn company says they want to put Armada on it as a cure. That's a fungicide. They want to charge me $130 for this application. So as it turns out, well, first of all, on the critiquing the photographs, Lee says the photos are great. And he goes on to write, this is a very common disease of Bermuda grass known as dollar spot. It's likely due to inadequate fertility, nitrogen. The client could put out 1.5 to 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet and see if that helps. It would be worth knowing if the neighbor without dollar spot fertilizes on a regular basis. Is the neighbor's lawn noticeably greener, etc.? Rarely, pretty much never, do we recommend fungicide applications for dollar spot in Bermuda grass due to its aggressive growth habit, recovers quickly when growing. If they want to go the fungicide route, then have them reference our profile on dollar spot, which mentions not only Armada, but several others. So there may be some variation there. There is some variation in effectiveness and of course in cost. So if they were to go that route, then there's some options there on turf files. Let me go ahead and copy into the chat box.
Looks like Charlotte already, she beat you to it. She's got the dollar spot turf file thing.
That is the exact one that I was going to put in. Thank you, Charlotte.
Do you need me to go to the next slide too? Is there something?
Yes, right, because this brings up the second point here, which is whether or not I asked Lee, so is this something that a master gardener could identify themselves? And he said what he called it was fairly easy to diagnose. So coming from someone with as much experience as he has, that's a little scary to me that if it's fairly easy for him, then, but we're going to give it a try here. So here's what he says. The individual dollar spots, okay, so the spots on the turf, not on the leaves, tend to be about the same size. Now the dollar, of course, refers to the old silver dollars, you know, like the Eisenhower dollar and earlier, although they can be larger with when the turf is let grown taller and not cut so short. All right, when severe, they will coalesce together to create larger areas of symptomatic turf. Dollar spot symptoms are often described as bleached looking, and I would agree. So you can kind of see that in these pictures here. They do tend to be, reading again what Lee wrote, they do tend to be whiter looking versus a dark brown tan lesion created by brown patch, which doesn't occur on warm season grasses, thus making it pretty easy to diagnose in the field. And go to the next slide, please there, Matt, because this is the one that he says you could confuse with it. He says, the only other disease would be leaf spot, Bipolaris cynodontis, that's the name of the fungus. However, it creates unique spots on the foliage and the symptoms will be dark, black, purple, irregular looking areas without distinct spots. So we don't have the circular spots in the turf here. And there will be very distinct lesions of the leaves. So yeah, dollar spot, you may have heard of it on some of the cool season grasses. There's also dollar spot on cool season grasses, but in the context of Bermuda grass, sounds like it's a diagnosis that with that information you can make in the field, and hopefully a nitrogen application will help the turf recover quickly. All right.
Okay, so this one is from Jackie Ramus, Carteret County, from July 27th. Unidentified insect, a disease or insect, could be frass or mold, but I don't think mold. Echinacea purpurea. Well, Mike and I discussed this a little bit, and Mike, did you come up with any message for this?
I do not have a message for this. If it was in just off the top of my head, if it were a really humid environment, I could imagine where some secondary molds could develop in there, but I would want to see that up close to be able to say.
Yeah, and we were looking at this together, and honestly, most of the flowers look good. This one, you know, obviously has some kind of debris or something in it. It doesn't look anything like distinct enough for us to either figure out. So in this case, if you're really unsure, this would be a sample that would be best to send in. Just if you're, we can examine under the scope and see whether that debris is organic or what it's from, basically. I would say the flowers look pretty decent otherwise. There's not, we don't see any much disease on the actual plants or insects or anything. It doesn't have any of the aster yellows or the area 5 mites as far as I can see. So this one is kind of a mystery, but I would, and something that photos might not or probably won't get to the bottom of. And so again, we might have to see the physical samples for.
Matt, is there any chance that there's a honeydew producing insect that could be visiting those flowers? That could be city mold?
I would kind of doubt it. The most of the honeydew producing ones would be on the foliage or the stems, not in the flower heads. There's possible something above it, but you would probably see a lot more honeydew on the petals and elsewhere, or in city mold on everything else. There are a few caterpillars that feed in aster heads, heads of flowers of the Asteraceae, that will leave fecal matter and can sometimes be a little bit hidden in that. I don't see anything obvious here. They're usually a little bit somewhat obvious. There are also some maggots that live in flower heads, but again, all I can see is kind of what looks like maybe debris, some discoloration of those spikes. But it'd be something that I'd rather see in person, kind of under a scope, to look for any kind of evidence for something else. So yeah, so I would say it's doesn't look like anything severe, anything that's worrisome. So again, if it's more of a curiosity, we would be happy to see the sample. Okay. All right. From Susan Yost in Union County, from May 1st. Insect slug. I think this is a leopard slug, but not sure what kind of damage, if any, does it do. These are much larger than most common slugs I find in the garden. Okay, so it is a slug. Slugs are mollusks, which they very distantly related to insects. They are related to clams and mussels and octopus and things like that. They are basically slugs are just a terrestrial snail without a shell. So this is an interesting one, though. It until recently, most of these larger slugs that kind of look like this, I would assume are leopard slugs or something like that. But this one is actually one of the mantle slugs. So here's some of my photos. The way you can distinguish is that the mantle is this part, that kind of this hood over the head and kind of part of the body. So in leopard slugs, which are very large, both these groups can get fairly large, several inches long. Leopard slugs have usually a little bit more defined spots on them, and they have the mantle only covers about the first third of the body. And then you can see this change in the texture on the rest of the body where there is no mantle. Now, mantle slugs are called that because this mantle goes all the way back to basically the tip of the tail. So you can, there's basically a similar texture throughout the body. And there are a couple of species that are common in North Carolina. I'm still not great at IDing both of them, the two main ones, but they are in the family Phylomycidae. Leopard slugs are in the family Limacidae, Limax being the genus. Now, as far as slugs and damage, now slugs can be voracious eaters of garden plants. There are some chemical controls that can be put out there. There's also people who use beer traps to try and trap them. You can also put out some ceramic pots that are upside down, or tiles out near your garden. And during the day, when the slugs hide from the heat and the sunlight, you can then open those up and grab all the slugs, throw them into a bucket of soapy water and drown them. Or also go out at night and scout for any, because slugs and snails are typically nocturnal. It's cooler out, it's more humid or moist, at least, because it's not so sunny. And you may be seeing them out there. So that's a good way to identify whether slugs are the culprit. You can also look for their trails. They leave slime trails on plants. And but really, there's some chemical controls, there's some other things that are out there. Nothing, they're not the easiest things to control or to manage. But making sure that you don't have refuges in the garden all the time. So those overturned pots and tiles or things like that, rocks where they can hide under during the day and then come out at night might help reduce their abundance. Anyway, slugs can be difficult. I think we might have a fact sheet somewhere about those. I have to look it up. But anyway, it is a mantle slug, but similar to a leopard slug.
So this is our, I think, third of 4 dogwoods in the set, and the description from Wanda in Durham County looks like a disease to me. Started about a month or so ago, progressing to what the leaves look like now. This will be the last day of July. Red flowering dogwood, Cornus Florida var rubra. So a good set of pictures showing both the upper and lower surface of the leaf and the tree in general. A little bit hard to distinguish the tree from the background there because of the shadow and the other objects in the field of view there. But other than that, a good set of photographs. Unfortunately, again, I do not know what this is. It's not going to be dogwood anthracnose, so rest easy there. Possibly Septoria leaf spot, but I am not sure. The good news again with this is that it doesn't look like something that's going to cause any kind of long-term damage to the tree. One other interesting thing that Matt and I know that actually Matt did, and he's doing it right now to remind me, thank you, Matt, is that we see that this was grown in a pot. And so, of course, that can bring a whole other situations as to whether it was grown in one location at one time of year and moved to another and so forth. Or was there something else that we were going to point out about that?
I don't think, yeah, go ahead.
No, go.
Oh, I don't think anything in particular. I guess with potted plants too, right? There's always water issues that can be there. Either not enough, they dry out a little bit too quickly, or too much water if there's not good drainage. And I don't know if anything being root bound or pot bound will be an issue in this, depending on the size. But yeah, that's I just noticed that it was because it's hard to tell from this photo where it's actually planted, or if it is planted. And in this photo, it appears to be in a pot. So those are, these are things that I would say are good to know, or it's something that we might notice that you might not. And so making sure, again, if the whole entire tree was taken with the base all the way up to the top, photo farther back, we would have seen that in the pot right away. And so it's good to take a few different images at different magnifications. Okay, anything else you want to add to that, Mike?
Just that I'm not familiar with this cultivar, but I would think that in the long term, you would want to make sure this gets planted into the soil and take care to treat the root ball before you do that, according to the information and videos that Barbara Fair has about planting trees. She's got some good videos out there. So yeah, unless it's particularly a dwarf variety that I'm not familiar with, it's amenable to pot culture, but I just would think that it might be a problem in the long term. Oh, there, I see a message here that from Juana saying that that she's waiting till fall to plant it, which is fair enough.
Good. Okay, great. All right, so we have 15 minutes or so, give or take. So we'll just get through these, I guess. We gotta probably keep going. Okay, next one. Oh, interesting. So these larvae were apparently eating my cucumber leaves. I will address this in a second, but just everybody take a picture in your mind of these little yellow spiky larvae doing a lot of damage, or some damage, to these leaves on the cucumber. Note the host as well. So it's a cucurbit. And I'm going to add that to this one. So Joanne Schwind from Iredell. So a pumpkin with strange whorls on the rind. I researched and cannot find a disease, worm, bug, etc. that would cause such a pattern. Leaves on the plants appear healthy and without disease or pests. And this unusual and intriguing swirls on the rind has this mystified. No other fruit appears to have this pattern, and fruits appear healthy. this was a really, really interesting image to get. And based on the host, and you'll see why I'm linking it to that other one, I had one idea. And actually, when I went online, I found some zucchini with this and a couple others. And there was one website that had the similar idea as I did. Now, it's not been proven, and we don't know for sure, but this looks like a very confused adult squash beetle. So these are the larvae of squash beetles. And the squash beetle, Epilachnum borealis, is actually a type of ladybug, but it's one of two main vegetarian ladybugs in North Carolina, the other being the Mexican bean beetle, which is on legumes. But squash beetles, of course, are on cucurbits. And the thing I think of, and what the other person online thought of, was these are, somebody could say, oh, this is somebody's graffiti or whatever. But what I think is beetles, squash beetles actually chew a small circle on leaves, usually stopping at the edges to corner off a section to feed on so that the plants don't send out chemicals or things like that. It's kind of like cutting the alarm wire for, doing a crime or something like that. Now, I suspect that when these beetles get on the plant, on the fruit, they try and make that line, but I think because they don't find an edge of a leaf, they keep going around and around and around. That's a hypothesis. We don't really know exactly, but based on the host, this behavior, things like that, I honestly think that's a very likely candidate. It's something that would be great to catch one in the act. And if you ever see one, definitely photograph it, send it to me. I'd love to know if that's really the case or not. But very cool. Thank you for submitting that. Really cool photos of a really weird thing going on. Okay.
That, let's see. Again, a dogwood disease problem, leaf discoloration, but this one now is a Cornus kousa, which tend to have fewer disease problems than our Cornus florida do. Again, I do not know. I would need to see a physical specimen on this one. Again, yeah, I just am flummoxed on this one. So sorry, I do see a little bit possible dieback there, defoliation. So definitely one to be watching.
Okay, same mantra again. Sometimes the images are not enough. So we especially for these microorganisms.
But kudos to taking a picture of the whole tree, yep. The upper and lower surfaces of the leaves. The only thing that would be lacking here would be that base of the trunk.
Yeah. So okay, but again, we can from the canopy we can tell that there is some dieback. These yellow leaves are the tips of the branches. I don't know if this is adventitious growth or not, but those are all suspicious for certain issues, I guess.
And technically, we don't know that it's dieback or defoliation. You'd have to look at the cambium to see. But I have no more, unfortunately, to contribute there.
Okay. All right. So this one is from John Bowen in Buncombe. I put these together because these are both on milkweed. Insect, not sure if it is a plant problem. Are these a problem? Are these a problem for milkweed? Lots of baby bugs from the adults. Asclepias incarnata. So these were submitted separately, but I'm going to talk about them together because they are both native insects that feed on milkweed. So most people will know about, monarchs, and that's the, main, everybody's baby. They love monarchs and everything, but there are also these other insects that are native. They won't actually, they evolved with the milkweed, so the milkweeds can tolerate them. And so you have the large milkweed bugs, very distinct bug, this orange and black bug. They do come in a couple other color morphs around, but these are the babies of them. And they basically mainly feed on the seed pods and the seeds within the seed pods of milkweed. They are not really, I wouldn't consider them a major pest. They're common on milkweeds around, but they're not going to, kill your milkweeds or anything like that. Same with milkweed tussock moths. This is another tiger moth, like that Virginia tiger moth. They're much, I think, more showy. Very diagnostic characters. This black, most of the CD black with this orangish gold stripe and these yellow bunches. And of course, the host is really important for ID. So milkweed. Again, these may defoliate some of it, but usually if it's a generally healthy plant, they can resist these native insects. So nothing, you know, you don't really need to control them. They may eat some of the plant that your monarchs want to eat, but you know, all these things have coexisted for a long time.
And with that, believe it or not, we've reached the halfway point on the slide. So I
Oh
guess
my
we pick up
gosh.
the pace here.
Okay.
Sarah sent the picture of the grafted apple tree disease problem. It would be interesting to know here where the graft union is. I think I kind of sort of see it in the picture on the right there above that large gall. But this is, if you go to the next slide, Matt, this is burr knot. And the specific cause is unknown, but it's basically a set of adventitious roots coming out of that point in the stem. It's affects certain rootstocks more than others, and certain scions as well. But the idea, it's possible that the humans have actually selected for this by, you know, rootstocks that are clonal rootstocks that are easily rooted. So then they tend to go into kind of root production mode like this. But it is not crown gall, and probably not a lot that you can really do about it, except avoiding those rootstocks that are most have a higher tendency, and planting it so that the rootstock is mostly the stem part of the rootstock is mostly in the ground, just an inch or so above the ground to have the graft union there.
Okay. All right. So this is from Pitt County, Roseanne. Tree with disease problem, random blotches of black and brown discoloration on some of the branches. Some leaves have yellow spots. This is black gum, Nyssa sylvatica. And this is a very common thing we see on black gum. This is not a disease. Luckily, it's not a pathogen. This is felt fungus. This is Septobasidium. They come in multiple colors. We often see black on black gum, but this is a tan one. I suspect it might be different species, but I don't know, Mike.
Likely, yeah.
Yeah, and so these are actually associated with armored scales. So there's an armored scale infestation under here. Black gums get various armored scales. They're not going to really be a problem to healthy trees, otherwise healthy trees. And really all this is just superficial. You got scales on the branches, and this felt fungus relies on feeding on the scales. I don't know if it's the tests or the actual, I think it does kill some of the scales themselves, but it's an association between a fungus and scale. It is a sign that they're scales, but like I said, if it's a healthy looking tree, otherwise it's not a big deal. They're difficult to treat anyway if it's a large tree. Now, one thing we were suspicious about is these spots, these leaf spots. We don't know exactly what those are. That's another one that might be best with a physical sample. So, Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. Another wait and see. I wouldn't suspect it is something that's going to be a serious issue. And then if you go to the next slide, there's the name there of Septobasidium. If you do see actual cankers or branches dying back on Nyssa, that this tree does get Botryophyria canker, but we don't see that really here in these photographs.
Okay. Keep moving.
Yes, Peg asking about these figs here, and I agree that it does look like some kind of an environmental issue. I ran this one by Bill Klein. If you want to go to the next slide, I think no, sorry, I don't have it. Yeah, I ran this by Bill Klein. He had never seen it before, but he wondered, especially those two fruits in the top there, that it could be some cold damage that occurred earlier in the fruit development. And he shared with me some photos, which I did not put on here, of cold rings on blueberry fruit. The bottom one there looks like a fruit that doubled. Again, you know, could it have been a cold injury or something that triggered that to happen? We don't know, but hopefully they were still, you know, good flavored. Anytime you get a deformation, you want to, you know, or a crack like you see in some of these, you worry about secondary things getting in, but probably environmental in its origin. And continuing, the interesting thing about this fig here, so the picture of the leaves themselves isn't as good of a clue in this case as the picture of the whole tree. Because you see the leaves curling up and dropping off, which is part of the description there, and seeing new leaves emerging, that's a good sign that the tree is actually going to be all right. The thing that I suspect here is actually rust, but on figs, you see these rusty spots, at least ours here on campus, without it actually being rust necessarily. So I would have to see that one under the microscope to see. The fig rust, the actual spores are very light colored. They're not like we usually think about it. And so the rusty spots, it could be a reaction from the disease, but it could be something else going on there. I would more go by those leaves that are drying up and falling off, as if you want to go to the next slide. This is confirmed fig rust from here on campus, the scientific name Ceratelium ficci. It is, as far as I know, only on figs, so it does not have any known alternate host. And so just keep those leaves cleaned up. There are no registered fungicides that I could find for trying to control this on fig, but hopefully the defoliation is occurring late enough in the season that you will already have had your figs.
Okay, this critter seemed to be eating my collards, found it on a collard leaf. Well, that is pretty exact for what this is. So collards, this is a harlequin bug. This is a type of stink bug, Mergantia histrionica, and which I love that scientific name. And basically, if this is specific to collards or to brassicans in particular, and you can actually see the really nice, distinct damage here. So they are a true bug. They're going to have sucking mouth parts. They insert their stylets into the plant tissue. They suck out all this green, and you get these star-like chlorotic or bleached out spots on the leaves. The eggs are really distinct. They are barrel-shaped with these stripes, black and white. Really interesting looking, I think, as the adults. So these can be, there are some pesticides that can be used for these, but if you see only a few here and there, they can be, again, hand removed or knocked into a bucket of soapy water. Eggs, if you have an issue with them year to year, I would definitely scout for eggs on the leaves and remove those eggs before they even hatch, and that can help manage them in a home garden system.
And Matt, isn't that one, as I recall, is a real problem on Cleome? You can get very serious damage. Remember that time we went to the Arboretum, or maybe you weren't with me then. But...
Yeah. And what is Cleome? I forget. Is it brassican too? No.
Spider flower, it's called.
Okay. I don't know that one well.
Anyway, just that's inside.
Okay. Okay, next one. Why does the new growth in the stem damage? The leaves not forming and turning brown started about 2 weeks ago. So this is a blackberry bush. You can see there's some nice leaves on the base, and then right up here you start to see, and I guess this is where the close-up is, you start to see these strappy leaves and then no real leaves here. So Mike and I looked and noticed, that there's some scabbiness here on the stem, which could be from a couple things. One of my thoughts was perhaps redneck cane borer. So this Bupressus jewel beetle, the larvae make galls in the stems of blackberry plants. The adults feed on the leaves, so it may be some of those holes in the leaves are from this species. But because it's in the stem, we would need to either see photos of what you've cut open. If you dissect the stem and find a larva in there, that could be a sign. Or if you were to send it in. But Mike, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I don't think this looks like disease. It does look odd though, the way it's the kind of and the picture on the left there, it's a little hard because the focus is in the background and not in the foreground. There are tricks you can do to help avoid that, but it looks like there's kind of a cut off, very thick, and not a nice taper to that. So there may be something else going on here. And unfortunately, of course, blackberries do have a lot of viral diseases, so I wouldn't rule one of those out, but I couldn't say for sure.
Yeah, so in this case, I would say cut it down, cut the stem a few inches down from where you see this kind of issue start, and split open the stem. If you don't see anything obvious in there, it might be worthwhile to bag it up and send it in for any disease confirmation. We do have at the MPRU here on campus, they're doing testing of various viruses. It is not a cheap service, but they can test for certain viruses and see what vectors it and things like that. Of course, if it does have a virus, it's going to be systemic, so you wouldn't be able to keep the plants anyway, or at least keep them healthy. Okay, please ID the insect. This is on a sidewalk in the neighborhood. The pencil is a good size reference. I actually had to, on this one, it's a little tough because there's actually two species that look very similar, but they are very different sizes. But based on the pencil width and measuring that out, this is a fiery searcher, Calisoma scrutator, which is a very large ground beetle. It's a predator, an active predator. They often feed on caterpillars and things like that. Close relatives have been imported to control gypsy moths by feeding on the caterpillars. But it's a very beautiful, large species of ground beetle, predatory beetle.
So on this Nellie Stephen Holly that Tom submitted from Guilford County, I do not know. My first thought when I saw this, or one of my first thoughts, especially with that little bit of splitting, there was maybe some kind of cicada alpha position injury, but in Guilford County, you would not have had the periodical cicadas of this brood. So I do not know. And as far as diseases, Nellie R. Stevens is pretty much a tank. It does not get disease problems very often at all. So a little bit strange to see those bare stretches of branches. So maybe some pruning and some observation there.
Yeah, definitely. If you see branches here and there dying off, it's good to follow it back until you get to a source. There may be some sapsucker damage here that's girdled some of those major branches. Lots of things, but just from these brown leaves and just from this canopy, these are really good to have. But if you were to follow them back and see if there's any kind of cankers or any issues, like Mike said, it might not be very common, but that's where you're going to see the issues, is back where it becomes healthy again.
And also, Tom, check your camera lens there to see if you don't have maybe a little bit of oil or something on there. It looks a little bit kind of a halo effect on the photograph there. So, Lynn, Haywood County, disease. This is an interesting one. Another Asclepias here. Just very quickly, I am not sure, but I hope it's not the following. And go to this page, because actually, before you go to that, this kind of looked to me, reminded me a little bit of symptoms of black rot on cabbage. And it turns out that there is a Xanthomonas, certainly not the same one as on cabbage, but a Xanthomonas that causes a blight on Asclepias that we've seen in the nursery. So now, go to the next slide, please, Matt. It looks a little bit different in the way I've seen it, with the angular leaf spots and the dark stem lesions and so forth. But I have seen it in the vascular system of these, so it's not outside the realm of possibility that's what it is. Again, I've seen it in nurseries, but don't know of it occurring in home landscapes. Other than that, I do not know what that might be.
Okay. This is a pretty straightforward one. Plant with an insect problem, galls, ficus tree, neighbor's tree. So another fig. These are not galls, though they're not. I don't know of any galls on stem galls on ficus, but these are scale insects. These are going to be soft scales, even though they're called soft scales at this stage, when the females are most mature and have laid eggs underneath them that will hatch into crawlers and infest the rest of the plant or get blown to other plants. They are not very soft at that stage. They're actually very hard spheres. But one of the easiest ways to tell is to go out there and kind of remove it. If it comes off cleanly and you got the bark underneath and maybe some wax and some eggs, that's a soft scale. If it were a gall, you would, if you break it off, it would chip off some of the wood because it's is a part of the actual plant, not something on top of it. These can be controlled by various pesticides, insecticidal soaps, and horticultural oils, things like that. We do have some good fact sheets on soft scales on ornamental plants in the landscape.
Carol, Buncombe County, disease problem on peppers started in early July. So you see it on a couple of different kinds of peppers there. Not sure about the one on the far right, but the especially photo in the middle looks very suspicious for bacterial spot. So if you want to go to the next slide, Matt. Unlike tomatoes, there aren't very many things that cause, relatively fewer things that cause leaf spots on peppers. And one of the most important is bacterial spot. Yet another Xanthomonas, we've mentioned that several times now. And during hot, humid weather, it's going to be running amok. The main thing to do here would be to make sure that your transplants are disease-free when they come in, because you can get it not only on that same plant, but have it spread to other plants there. Possibly, this is not an area where I'm necessarily up to date, but this could also spread to tomatoes possibly, as well as to peppers in the garden. So it's going to be hard to get this under control with the hot, rainy weather, but you know, copper sprays may not help a little bit, but I wouldn't put a whole lot of faith in that when the weather is conducive. So you see the necrotic spots and yellow halos around them, and also notice how a lot of times it's coming in at the edges there. So where the guttation fluid gets pulled in after it, you know, through those hydathodes, and that's the way the bacteria can get into the plant. You may think you could just pick off the leaves that are affected and hope that the newer ones are not. That might help a little, but the problem is that these bacteria can exist in what we call an epiphytic phase, where they're just colonizing the surface of apparently healthy leaves. They reach a population level that's high enough and then they infect. So it may be farther advanced than what you realize. So I wish I had better news, but that's what it looks like. So I'll also rotate. Yeah, find another, you know, clean up all that debris after the end of the season, and have your peppers and tomatoes in a different location next year. Then do not know what might be the problem here with the woodland phlox. This would be one where we want a complete sample with somewhere around the edge of the dying patch there that includes some of the living and as well as some of the dying stems and leaves and the roots and a little bit of associated soil. So not able to tell from this particular photograph. It's a pretty sight though.
All right, this one was insects on globe artichoke. And so these are these little reddish bugs. Now they look kind of like those milkweed bugs, but they are a different group. And I've actually combined that with this next one. This insect was sitting on a cucumber vine, not sure whether it was eating it. Now these are the baby leaf-footed bugs. You can see this one actually has a little leafy leg. These are a little bit, these are kind of like elementary school age. They're not yet, you know, close to adulthood, but they're not newborns. They often stay in groups like this. Assassin bugs rarely stay in groups very long because they will eat each other. These also aren't black with the yellow tips of the antennae. Other things, I have some previous PPMPs with where I tell the difference, but they're going to grow up to be this leaf-footed bug. Now this species is Leptoglossus phylopus, which is a very common one. It's got this very clean white stripe across the back and these nice leafy legs. They are very prolificous, which means they feed on lots and lots of plants. They aren't usually a super bad issue, especially if they're feeding on kind of the stems or the other parts of the plants. When they feed on fruits, they can cause issues. So these, you know, I would try and get the eggs. I would show you the eggs, but I don't have time. Or just kind of, again, pick off the adults. They do stink like stink bugs. Or, you know, remove them. There are some chemicals that can be used, but they're not, you know, a very consistent pest, and they are found on all different plants all over the place.
Then Haywood County, blue iris here. Again, this is one that we would not be able to diagnose from photos alone. The only thought I had was with the comment about the pond edge liner being installed, if the water had been drained at some point in that process, and maybe since the blue flag iris does like it wet, I wonder if maybe it got a little too dry there. But other than that, I don't know, and we don't have enough close-ups to see, you know, are there any actual distinct lesions on these leaves or not? You know, look at the below ground parts and see if there's any decay. But yeah, wouldn't be able to tell from this photograph.
Okay. I think we only have a few more left. So we'll go through these. So this was just an oh my, look at this really pretty moth. This is a really beautiful moth. Actually, in fact, it looked like the photo was just off tinged, but you can see in the background it's not. It's just because this moth and the leaves are so green. This is a Pandora sphinx, which is a really beautiful species. I have not yet seen myself in life, but they're around. Very pretty sphinx moth. And I forget what the larvae feed on, but I can find that out later and post that.
And yet another fig. So figs, dogwoods, milkweeds.
Yep. Oh my.
Yeah. Tomatoes wilting. If you go to the, I forget if it's the disease or the diagnostic chapter of the Extension Master Gardener manual, there is a discussion of different possible causes of wilt, and there are a number here. So you talk about it not observing mycelium dripping from the cut stem. Well, mycelium doesn't drip. That's the kind of fungal threads, the masses of fungal threads. But I assume that you meant the bacterial streaming that you can see. Hopefully that's the case. That it is not bacterial wilt. Might be good to check because that's going to persist in the soil. It does look like it's natural soil rather than a potting mix here. There are a number of other possibilities in terms of vascular disease. Doesn't quite look, I mean, like southern stem blight. I don't see any of the mycelium there or sclerotia that would be evidence of that. So yeah, this one I am not sure, but physical sample would help, and may even be a good thing, worth the money, just to know going forward what kind of problems it may represent. And this basil, I do not know. So Matt and I talked about this one. One of the first things that we thought about was the some insect feeding, 4-line plant bug, but that wouldn't be in Onslow County. It does not look like downy mildew. I don't really think it's a disease. So Matt, if it isn't bugs, then I think it may be some kind of a nutritional issue or some other abiotic, but can't say for sure.
Yeah, and with this, you know, some sucking insects their saliva is toxic to the tissue, cause necrosis. You know, with this much damage, again, if you see a lot of bugs and a lot of certain types of damage, definitely collect the bugs or take photos of the bugs, the insects or mites or things like that, because there may be a link. There may not be, but it's good to have all that evidence.
Yeah, and okay. I should have said on the tomato that not seeing in the quick and dirty test in a glass of water, beaker of water, not seeing the bacterial streaming doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have it. So I wouldn't take that as a for sure negative. So at least a fairly easy one here from Jan and Onslow. Somewhat gelatinous, amber colored, translucent, and it's not technically a shelf fungus. This is one of the jelly fungi. And if you go ahead to the next slide here, this is probably Auricularia, common name of jelly ears or wood ears. It's a saprobe. You'll only see this on branches that are already dead, so it's not causing any primary damage to the tree. It's just one of our helpful organisms that decays the dead wood in the environment. Very jelly-like texture. There is or are some similar ones. Excidia, a species or two of that can look similar, but I'm going to go with Auricularia on this one. And they, when it gets dry, then they'll kind of shrink down and turn darker, but rain makes them look nice and lush like this. Japanese magnolia, I'm not familiar with that term. I do know that the saucer magnolias get some strong powdery mildew on them. You mentioned here, Pamela, that there may be some, or you thought maybe alga, but I wouldn't, even though it does look a little bit like algal leaf spot, I wouldn't think that you would have so much out in the open like this. It would tend to want to occur on only the shadiest leaves there where it gets a lot of moisture and not a lot of sun. So I am not clear on this one, especially on the right-hand side there where you've got that kind of necrosis along the veins. So
Yeah,
unsure.
this might be one where you send in a sample, you know, one of the branches that has some symptomatic and asymptomatic leaves. But yeah, it could also be environmental, some of this stuff. Okay, let's see. Well, what do you think, Mike?
All right, even when I was an undergraduate learning up in Minnesota, learning weeds in the grassy weeds in the seedling stage, it was not an easy task. So much less so now, 1,000 miles away and many years under the bridge. So I would not be able to identify these weeds. Flower beds, wet ditch. Yeah, I mean, there is some guidance on turf files about weeds, but I don't know that at the seedling stage like this, it's going to be much help. You could try contacting Dr. Fred Yelverton in the Crop and Soil Science Department. He is the turf weed expert. We did see someone suggest, Charlotte suggested it might be doveweed. Yeah, if it gets a little bigger, then that's a possibility. It's not a grass, but it's a grass-like plant. Mm-hmm. It can fool you for grass. And for Jim at Onslow, trying to get rid of his crepe myrtle. Long and short of this one is that Roundup probably not the best choice. I checked with Joe Neal on this too. He agrees that triclopyr would be a better choice. There are a lot of different names, different brand names for that. The active ingredient, triclopyr, it's sold in brush killers or poison ivy, poison oak killers. So just be careful because there are different concentrations, whether you're using it as a stump treatment versus a leaf treatment.
Okay. All right, and I think this is the last one. So somebody just want to show off their monarchs on the milkweed. So this is another milkweed. This might be what, fourth, is definitely fourth or fifth. But yeah, so they're out there too, again, coexisting with a number of other insects that like milkweed. Again, I'm not sure what those pests were in that one sample, but I'd be curious because milkweed does get some other things. But yeah, thanks for sharing. And I guess we're going to wrap it up with that. And basically, thank you very much for submitting your photos. We very much enjoyed looking through these. Sorry we didn't have answers for everything. That is just the way it goes because some of these things are difficult to tell from photos. Mike, you want to add anything?
Nope, I think it's good. I hope that you guys found it interesting and different this month to be able to look at the photos that you submitted.
Okay, and I'm going to stop sharing now. Yeah, let us know if you have any other questions or send some photos later on, but thanks.
All right, very good. Can you guys hear me?
A little bit weak, but yes.
Okay, I keep getting a low battery warning, so I've switched my microphone. Is this any better?
Sounds good.
All right, great.
The battery in your microphone or your voice?
It's in my headset, so it's the microphone running off the headset. All right, so we're going to wrap up with plant these instead. And with it being August and we're entering prime hurricane season, I chose lacebark elm as the species to feature to not plant, especially near structures, because this is a fairly weak wooded tree.
This is a type of elm, Ulmus parvifolia. And there's also some concern about it becoming invasive. It does self-seed rather prolifically, which can just be annoying in a landscape, but the seeds have a little papery wing around them kind of, and they will blow around in the landscape. So if you had it planted next to a wooded area, the seed could certainly start moving into these natural areas and become an invasive concern. So we're saying don't plant lacebark elm near structures or natural areas because of these concerns. And I mean, otherwise it is a really tough urban, very urban tolerant tree, tolerates a lot of tough conditions, but you know, we want to be aware of some of its less positive features and place it correctly. So the information about it being weak wooded actually comes from the University of Florida, which did a huge study through 9 hurricanes of tree performance. And they observed over 18,000 trees, 80 different species, and they recorded when trees failed. So they classified failure as either being uprooted, broken at the trunk, or having over 50% of the branches damaged. And you can see listed here the species that were all found to have the lowest wind resistance or medium low wind resistance. So if you've ever been around a hurricane or observed trees after a hurricane, there's probably not a lot of surprises here. Things like pecan and tulip poplar, some of our oak, floral oak, water oak, also some of the maples, green ash, sycamore, and pines. So showing up as not tolerating or resisting the wind damage terribly well. So these are things as well as the lacebark elm we'd want to avoid planting really close to structures in case of wind damage, both from hurricanes or just strong thunderstorms. And we tend to find that these might also be more prone to ice damage too. And just want to, before I recommend some things that were found to have really good wind tolerance, just want to mention that it's more than just the species. There's a lot of things that go into how trees perform during storms. Soil conditions are huge, the depth of the soil moisture levels, the health of the root system, especially when we're talking about trees uprooting, the design. Trees that are all alone out in the landscape are less likely or more likely actually to see damage. Trees in groups perform better, and just the age, health, and structure of the tree. So there are some things you can do in pruning trees, in preparing the site, and selecting the right tree for the right place. And back in 2019, we actually had Barb Fair as our guest speaker, and she shared some of these things that you can do to care for trees with storms in mind. So if you go back to our 2019 Plants, Pests, and Pathogen, go to our playlist, you can find that and watch that and learn about some of the things that you can do to keep your trees healthy and strong. You can also go to the University of Florida Hurricanes and Trees website. They have a lot of resources and recommendations there. But tree species is part of it. Trees do vary in their strength and the strength of the wood, its ability to resist wind damage. So what we're going to talk about is some of the most wind resistant native shade trees that you could plant instead of lacebark elm. So we are looking at native trees because we are trying to avoid that invasive potential. So especially if you're planting trees near natural areas, near wooded areas, better to go with something that is not likely to become an invasive potential. And of course, then the wind resistance for storms. So it's probably no big surprise that live oak is one of the highest rated for wind resistance. It is native to coastal communities up through North Carolina and just a little bit into Virginia. As a landscape tree, it's better in zones 8 to 10, so it's more for our coastal communities, and this, of course, eventually gets to be a very large, wide-spreading tree. So live oak, great option. If you are more inland and you're looking for a shade tree, think about Shumard oak. This is another native oak, Quercus shumardii. It's not as large maybe as some of our oaks. It gets to be about 40 to 60 feet tall. You can see in this picture showing some fall color. So Shumard oak is a good selection. And then river birch as well. It's very interesting. I don't know if you've ever watched a river birch in a strong storm where there was a lot of wind. They will whip back and forth, just like some of those little, those things that blow up with air and move back and forth when they're advertising things like car wash and stuff. They will just whip back and forth, but rarely break. So river birch, very flexible and moves with the wind. And typically actually is quite a bit larger than most people anticipate. You see it often placed in locations that can get too big. And I think because it grows often with multiple trunks, people think of it more like a crepe myrtle, but it does get quite a bit larger than crepe myrtle, and then has the beautiful peeling bark. So definitely something to consider as a shade tree. Think of it as a shade tree as well as an ornamental tree. Then some more options that were found in the Florida study to have medium to high wind resistance. Ironwood, this is a tree that's also sometimes called musclewood, because if you look at the trunks, the wood is very dense, very hard, and it's rippled, kind of like mussels. So kind of easy to identify just from the trunk and the bark. It doesn't have a very showy flower. It can get some kind of burgundy fall color tones. Has a kind of interesting seed head, but just a nice small tree. It really rarely gets above about 30 feet and often does grow naturally with multiple trunks. So it's quite an attractive for its just form and bark and the trunk, both in the winter and the summer. Then we have black gum, which has already been mentioned one time today. We saw those felt fungus on the black gum. So black gum was also our plant of the month back in October 2020. So you can go back to that recording and learn a little more about it. But you see it's kind of a tall, upright tree versus something that's more widespreading. It will get to be 30 to 50 feet tall and can have really spectacular fall color. And then again, persimmon is another option. It has a really similar growth habit, persimmon does, to black gum, similar height, 30 to 50 feet. And if you have a female tree, you will get the persimmon fruits. And of course, you want to wait until it gets good and cold, or actually what you're actually waiting for is that they're really ripe if you do want to eat them. They can be very astringent when they're unripe. It doesn't actually have to frost on them, but usually by the time they're fully ripe, it's about when we see our first frost. So persimmon can be quite an attractive kind of medium-sized shade tree. And then those fruits on it in October often look like little pumpkins or jack-o'-lanterns. So it's very well suited for the season. So those are some options for wind-resistant native shade trees. You can explore more on the Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox. If you go to the Find a Plant feature and select whole plant type trees, and then you can go down to or go up to landscape and resistance to challenges and select wind, you'll get 55 options. So I encourage you always to explore the plant toolbox when you are selecting plants for your landscape. And we're going to roll right into the announcements and finish things up. We do want to let you know these slides for the announcements are available. So if you're having a meeting, Master Gardener volunteer meeting, and you want to use any of these slides just to share some of the things that are going on, you can use this link, go.ncsu.edu/NCEMG-announcements. And you'll be able to open this slide set as a Google slide set. You can either copy it or download it. So hope to see many of you this Thursday, August 26th at 10 o'clock, where we're going to be joined by some of our librarians from NC State Libraries to talk about how to search. So Google like a pro. So we're going to learn tips for searching, for finding information from Extension, NC State Extension, and other specific sources, as well as how to find some great YouTube videos that are sharing research-based information. So I hope to see many of you there. If you can't join us live, we will be recording and posting this on the EMG YouTube channel. Another really exciting event coming up later this week on Saturday, August 28th, is the J.C. Ralston Symposium. So it's Gardening in the South. It's from 9 o'clock till noon. And it is no charge. So it's a free symposium, but they do require registration. So if you go to their website, you can learn more about it. They've got some great presenters lined up, including Barb Fair at NC State, Julie Shirk from NC State, and Basil Campbell from Leaf and Limb. So that will be an exciting event, open to the general public as well. Online, just need to register. J.C. Ralston Arboretum has lots of great events throughout the month. So encourage you to go to their website, look under events, look on the calendar, and you can see things like their monthly Gardening 101, which is typically the fourth Wednesday. They have plant lovers tours and their midweek with Mark. You'll find those on the calendar if you can take advantage of them. We have a continuing education webinar for Master Gardener volunteers scheduled for September 21st. This will be a look at plant ID. So we will be joined by Laura Barr, who also leads the plant ID courses that are a partnership between the Department of Horticulture at NC State and Longwood Gardening. She'll talk about plant ID techniques and terminology. And so it'll be a great introduction or refresher potentially to plant ID, and also give you a teaser for what those courses are like. So you may decide after that to sign up for some of the courses, which will actually be starting again in October. There'll be a series on houseplants. There'll be a series just focusing on edible plants. Then the annuals, perennials, vines, and ground covers, and the trees, shrubs, and conifers. So lots of great plant ID courses. Full schedule up coming up this fall. And we also want you to save the date for our next Inspire, Connect, Empower webinar. We've been talking about this for a while. We've been encouraging folks to volunteer, to share tips from what works in their county, and we have a great group of counties that are going to be sharing tips from volunteers who help manage the hotline and respond to questions on the hotline. So we want you to save the date for October 6th. We're saying approximately 1 o'clock. We're nailing down that time. It'll definitely be in the afternoon. 1 o'clock, we might actually move it to 1:30. So we'll get that posted on the EMG intranet calendar as soon as we get that date finalized. And of course, the International Master Gardener Conference is coming up. Less than a month now, September 12th through 17th. It is going to be virtual, and it is open to the public. So Master Gardener volunteers, we really encourage every Master Gardener volunteer to participate, but you can invite your friends, have them go onto the website and register and learn from all these exciting speakers, and they can start to get a feel for what Master Gardener program is like, and just learn about the types of things that if you were in the Extension Master Gardener program, these would be the things you would learn about. And then we will see everybody again next month, September 28th. We have a really special guest speaker, Dr. Jim Baker, who's Professor Emeritus here at NC State with entomology and plant pathology. He's going to tell us all about the things he wished he had known from the start. So things he's learned over his career with NC State and the plant disease and insect clinic. So I know that will be great. Just one little scheduling announcement. We have moved our final webinar for the season from October 26th, which falls during the week of Extension Conference. So we're moving that to November 2nd. So our season finale will be November 2nd. That already has been changed on the Extension Master Gardener intranet calendar. So just want to let everybody know, remind you, of course, next month. And between now and next month, you can always catch up and review past recordings from our playlist on YouTube or from our website, where we have index of recordings and we have the current schedule posted. So it was wonderful to see everybody today, and we're so glad you could join us. We're going to wrap things up, and we'll be sending out many of the links that were mentioned in the follow-up email. Hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week, and look forward to seeing you next month.